In the Soviet Gulag, suffering wasn't a punishment. It was the daily routine. Some prisoners begged for death. Others mutilated themselves just to escape work. This wasn't a prison. It was a machine built to break the human soul. Women disappeared into the Gulag, and the world never heard their screams. Today, we open the gates they died behind. No judge, no trial, no mercy. Welcome to the Soviet Gulag, where the torture never stopped. Tortures used on women. In the Soviet Gulag, women were not just prisoners. They were targets. Their suffering was different, deeper, and often far more terrifying than what men endured. For many women, the nightmare started the moment they entered the camp. Guards would order them to strip for inspection, often in the open, in the freezing night, as guards laughed or made comments. This wasn't about security. It was about humiliation. Some women passed out from cold before the inspection even ended. Inside the barracks, the danger didn't stop. Women were trapped between criminal inmates and guards, both groups knowing the women had no protection. Assaults were so common that many women slept in tight groups, pressing their backs together, trying to block attackers with their bodies. It rarely worked. In some camps, women were placed in night brigades. These weren't work units. They were women chosen by guards for exploitation. If they refused, they were punished with starvation rations, solitary cells, or violent beatings. Some women accepted the abuse just so they could survive long enough to see their family again. Pregnancy brought even more horror. Women who became pregnant, often through assault, were forced to give birth in filthy, freezing rooms with no medical help. Many newborns died within hours. The ones who survived were often taken away immediately, sent to orphanages, or left to die. Mothers were not allowed to touch or hold their own babies. There were also forced abortions. These weren't done in hospitals. They were done on wooden tables with no anesthesia by untrained camp workers using tools meant for animals. Many women died from infection. Those who survived carried pain for the rest of their lives. Some women were put into secret punishment units called women's isolation barracks. These were cold, dark rooms where women were locked together with no heat, no blankets, and barely any food. Diseases spread fast in these rooms: pneumonia, typhus, infections. Women begged for death just to end the cold, and then came the worst punishment of all: the water torture. Guards dragged women outside, stripped them, and poured buckets of icy water over them while temperatures were below freezing. The water turned to ice instantly, trapping their hair and clothes to the ground. Many froze to death where they stood. The Gulag did not see women as people. It saw them as tools, as bodies, as things that could be broken in silence. And for thousands of women, that silence followed them to the grave. Standing cells, the standing kaza. If the ice cell was slow death by freezing, the standing cell was slow death by exhaustion. A torture so cruel that even guards whispered about it. A standing cell was not a room. It was a concrete tube just wide enough for a human body and no wider. Prisoners could not sit. They could not kneel. They could not turn. They could not lie down. They stood, hour after hour, day after day. Inside the tube, there was no light, only darkness. Prisoners described it as being buried alive while still awake. The air was cold and wet. The walls dripped with condensation. Some cells had a tiny hole carved near the top, just big enough to breathe through. If two prisoners were placed inside, the second one suffocated guards used standing cells. For any reason, talking during work, missing quotas, or simply looking tired. Sometimes they used it for entertainment. A prisoner would be shoved inside, the metal bar slammed shut, and the darkness swallowed them. Within hours, their legs began shaking uncontrollably. Within a day, the pain became unbearable. A burning fire from the feet to the spine. Prisoners said the worst moment was when their legs stopped shaking, because that meant the nerves were dying. Some stood in these cells for 48 to 72 hours straight. A few survived longer, but they never walked normally again. Inside the standing cell, time dissolved. Many prisoners hallucinated voices or shadows. Some screamed until their throats bled. Others stayed silent and mentally detached from their bodies. A few went mad and started banging their heads against the wall, hoping to knock themselves unconscious. When the guards finally opened the door, prisoners didn't step out. They fell out, collapsing onto the ground like broken puppets. Some were dragged by their arms back to the worksite. Others were taken straight to the infirmary, a place where there was no medicine, only deathbeds. Worst of all, the torture didn't end when they left the cell. Survivors often suffered permanent leg damage, swollen joints, nerve paralysis, and infections from standing in their own sweat and urine. Many never recovered the ability to walk without pain, and if a prisoner fainted inside the cell, the guards simply opened the door, threw cold water on them, and put them back inside. In the Gulag, suffering was never a mistake. It was the goal. The informant nightmare. Trust is a crime. In most prisons, inmates fear the guards. In the Gulag, inmates feared each other. One of the most terrifying forms of torture wasn't physical. It was the informant system, a psychological weapon designed to destroy trust, friendships, and even family bonds. The Soviets called these spies stukachi. Prisoners called them something else, the enemy inside the barracks. At any moment, in any conversation, the person standing next to you could be listening. A smile, a whisper, a joke about Stalin, even a tired expression could be reported. And a simple report could send you to solitary, the punishment brigades, or even execution guards rewarded informants with tiny privileges. An extra slice of bread, a softer work assignment, or simply being spared from punishment. That was enough to turn starving, desperate people against each other. Men betrayed friends they had known for years. Women pointed fingers at the only people who protected them. Some prisoners even reported themselves under a fake name just to gain favor. This system turned every barrack into a battlefield of suspicion. People stopped talking. They avoided eye contact. They slept with one eye open, terrified that someone would slip a rumor about counter-revolutionary behavior into the guard's ear. The worst part? Sometimes the informants were forced. Guards beat or tortured prisoners until they agreed to spy. After that, the victim was trapped. Report others or suffer again. It was the perfect trap. No matter what they did, someone got hurt. In the Gulag, loneliness wasn't an accident. It was designed. By destroying trust, the administration stripped prisoners of the only weapon they had left. Unity. Without unity, there was no resistance, no hope, no humanity. The informant nightmare didn't leave bruises. It left people broken in a different way, afraid of everyone, even after they were freed. The starvation trap. Work till you die. One of the Gulag's most cruel tortures didn't involve chains or beatings. It involved food, or the lack of it. This system was known among prisoners as the starvation trap, because once you fell into it, you almost never came out alive. In the Gulag, food wasn't given equally. Your ration depended on how much work you produced. Hit the quota? You got a thin slice of bread and a ladle of watery soup. Miss the quota? Your ration was cut in half. Miss it again? It was cut again. Soon the prisoner was eating so little that they no longer had the strength to work, which meant even fewer rations the next day. It was a death spiral the system fully intended. In places like the Kolyma goldfields, men chopped at frozen ground with bare hands or rusted tools. Temperatures fell to -50 degrees Celsius. Their breath froze on their faces, their boots turned stiff with ice, and their fingers cracked open from cold. They burned thousands of calories each day, but ate barely a few hundred. Within weeks, a strong worker looked like a skeleton. Within months, ribs poked through skin, legs swelled painfully, and eyes sank deep into the skull. Prisoners called these people goners. Once someone reached that stage, they could not be saved. They were sent to the weak brigade, where tasks were impossible, hauling logs heavier than themselves, digging ditches through permafrost, pushing carts loaded with boulders. Guards knew they would collapse. They didn't care. The purpose wasn't labor. It was exterminated. Some prisoners tried cutting off their fingers or injuring themselves to escape the workload. Others stole potato peels from garbage piles. A few fought dogs for scraps. Most simply lay down in the snow and never got up again. The starvation trap was simple: work or die. But in the Gulag, even working meant dying slowly. Mock executions. If physical torture broke the body, mock executions broke the mind. This was one of the Gulag's cruelest weapons, a way to destroy a prisoner without leaving a single mark. It usually began at night. A prisoner would be dragged from their bunk, half asleep, half frozen, with no explanation. Guards loved the fear that came with silence. They marched the prisoner out of the barracks, through dark snow-covered paths, toward the forest or the rifle range, the same places where real executions happened. Most prisoners didn't even fight. They walked like ghosts, convinced this was their last night alive. When they arrived, guards forced them to dig their own grave with shaking hands, with frozen soil that tore their skin open. Some prisoners collapsed while digging, sobbing, begging, praying. Others dug quietly, already broken inside. Once the hole was deep enough, the guard would make them kneel beside it. Sometimes they were blindfolded, sometimes not, because fear was more powerful when they watched everything happening. A firing squad lined up behind them, rifles raised, cold metal clicked, deep breaths. A command shouted in the dark, and then blank rounds. No bullet, no blood, just a deafening shot that ripped through the night and through the prisoner's mind. Many fainted instantly. Some screamed. Some went completely silent, falling into shock. Others laughed uncontrollably, a broken, hollow laugh that haunted barracks for days. But the torture didn't end. After the shot, guards often pushed the prisoner into the grave, shoveled dirt over them, then pulled them out at the last second. They called it rebirth, but it was really psychological murder, the destruction of a person's inner world. Running the gauntlet. Among all the punishments in the Gulag, running the gauntlet was one of the most openly violent. It wasn't hidden in a cell or carried out in shadows. This torture happened in front of everyone, on purpose. It was designed to injure the body, humiliate the soul, and remind every other prisoner exactly who was in charge. A prisoner sentenced to the gauntlet was dragged into the yard and forced to run between two long lines of inmates. But these prisoners weren't spectators. They were the weapon. Each one was ordered to strike the victim with whatever they had: sticks, belts, shovels, boots, even bare fists. Refusing to hit meant joining the punishment yourself, so everyone hit hard. The guards watched for any sign of mercy, and if they saw a prisoner intentionally holding back, they punished them twice as harshly later. The victim tried to run, but most couldn't. Within seconds, they were stumbling, blinded by blood, dizzy from pain, and collapsing to the ground. Falling didn't save them. It made things worse. On the ground, they were beaten from all sides, kicks to the ribs, boots to the spine, blows to the skull. Some prisoners cracked teeth, broke ribs, or lost consciousness before reaching the end. Others never reached the end at all. Guards often enjoyed dragging the half-dead prisoner upright, forcing them to continue while the entire camp watched. The point of this torture wasn't just pain, it was public humiliation. It forced prisoners to hurt one another, creating anger, distrust, and guilt. It destroyed unity, which is exactly what the camp administration wanted. In the Gulag, the gauntlet wasn't just punishment, it was a message. You don't belong to yourself, you belong to fear. Sleep deprivation. Sleep deprivation in the Gulag wasn't just a punishment, it was a weapon. A slow, invisible torture that didn't leave bruises, but destroyed the mind from the inside. It started in the interrogation cells. A prisoner would be dragged in, placed under a bright lamp, and questioned for hours. Then more hours, then entire days. Guards never let them close their eyes. If they began to doze off, a guard slammed the table, kicked the chair, or splashed cold water on their face. Some interrogators used a simple trick. They stood silently and stared at the prisoner for hours, waiting for them to break first. No questions, just silence and fear. Most prisoners cracked long before the first confession. After 24 hours, the body shook on its own. After 48 hours, prisoners saw shadows moving in the corners. After 72 hours, they heard voices that weren't real. Some begged to confess crimes they never committed. Anything just to sleep for a minute. In the barracks, sleep was no safer. Guards woke prisoners without warning, shouted orders in the middle of the night, or forced emergency head counts that lasted hours in the freezing cold. Criminal inmates also tormented others by yelling, fighting, or stealing blankets. As days passed without rest, prisoners lost control of their thoughts. They forgot where they were, who they were, or why they were being punished. Some started talking to walls or whispering to imaginary people. Others laughed randomly or burst into tears for no reason. A few reached the point of total collapse, walking like zombies, eyes open but empty, unable to speak or understand anything around them. That's when guards threw them back into the labor fields, where they usually died within days. Sleep deprivation didn't break bones, it broke reality. And once a prisoner's mind cracked, there was no coming back. The Soviet Gulag wasn't just a prison system. It was a place built to crush the human spirit. Millions entered, but only shadows walked out. The scars left behind were deeper than wounds. They were the kind that lived in the mind forever. Remembering these victims isn't just history, it's a warning. If you want more brutal, hidden chapters of our past, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, which torture methods shocked you the most?